Have you ever seen those video game speedruns on YouTube? Gamers frantically playing through an entire game or level of a game as fast as humanly possible. Adrenaline is high, chaos ensues, and in the end, they realize they were far more capable of doing something kind of extraordinary than they originally thought. Some people work extremely well under pressure. They're the pull an all-nighter before exams, getting ready for an event 10 minutes before leaving kind of people. And other people, they work better in a calmer, more lower pressure environment. A guy named Victor Linneo said diamonds are formed under pressure and bread dough rises when you let it rest. We are all our own things, and what may be motivating to you may be crippling to others. Now I think like all things in life, there's a balance here. The people who work well under pressure need a break sometimes too, and the people who go at a slower pace also go through periods of crunch time. The majority of the time, I'm bread. Just between chronic illness and simply my personality, I generally prefer to take my time on things. To work on a project over a larger period of time. To go through phases of learning and research, practice and preparation, and ultimately bringing a piece to completion. But even though that's how I generally do things, life is always happening around you, and sometimes life things set a time limit on your projects. So I present to you my speedrun painting. The next theme in my personal painting challenge this year was libraries. Now I was over the moon to get started on this theme. It was definitely one of my favorites for the scene study challenge, and I was super excited and a little nervous to see what original ideas I could come up with for it. Now y'all know I love books. I could honestly spend just about all day reading. I love classics, I love nonfiction, I love fantasies and mysteries, basically any book I can get my hands on. While I was growing up, my mom always said that if you can read, you can learn anything. And I absolutely believe that's true. No, don't get me wrong. People don't become doctors simply by reading. They have to put what they learn into practice to turn that knowledge into skill. But reading teaches us so much. And not only do we learn from books, but we can also explore through books. Books open up our imaginations and help us turn words into feature films in our minds. Like, just take a second and think about that. That's freaking magical! So you take a whole building like the library that's full of books. That is countless worlds and stories and facts all gathered together, ready to change your life in big ways and small ways. So with all of these thoughts and feelings about books in my mind, I was setting myself a pretty big task in trying to communicate even just a fraction of them in an illustration. I figured out pretty quickly that I wanted to start telling the story of one of my little characters of the Marikey Meadow. Now if you don't know what the Marikey Meadow is, you can check out my last video for a little bit more context. But we'll talk more about the character in a bit. So I did a couple of thumbnail sketches and little character doodles in my sketchbook, pretty quickly landed on a composition I liked, and threw it into Krita to finalize the sketch digitally. I moved some things around, worked out the details, and brought it up to my liking. And here we enter our speedrun. So on Monday of last week, I decided that I would be taking an impromptu weekend trip from Friday to Sunday. Not a big deal. I would work a bit on my painting that week, then come home and finish it the following week. Now this all would have been just fine until I realized that I would have no footage for this week's video unless this painting was entirely done. So, after a quick panic, I determined that I would in fact get this entire painting done in 4 days. Actually more like 3.5 days because I had an event during one of those afternoons. That's beside the point. So unintentionally, I set a parameter for this painting that I really believe helped it become one of my favorite illustrations I've made. And that parameter was time. Now time can be a very big stressor or a big motivator. I chose to use it as a motivator for this painting. A motivator to focus in, to put aside any distractions and really devote myself to the completion of this painting. Now I'd like to add a little caveat here though. I don't want you to hear that my only goal here was finishing the painting. Like I said earlier, my love of and my passion for reading are very much entwined in this piece, and I was very devoted to expressing that. I wanted to give this illustration my very best effort. Not just get it done, There's this phrase I've heard a lot, better done than perfect. And I think the meaning behind that is sometimes getting a job or task finished is more important than the quality of your execution of it. Let's say you're exhausted. You've had a long day and you're really hungry. Now you could take the time to make a perfectly seasoned, beautifully plated dish of spaghetti, or you could make a kinda sloppy deli sandwich with mustard leaking out the edges and a side of stale potato chips. In this case, choosing to make the sloppy sandwich isn't morally worse than the beautiful plate of spaghetti. So you choose to make the sandwich simply because you need to eat and don't have the energy to make a quote-unquote perfect dinner. Sometimes finished is more important than perfect. Now this mentality doesn't apply to everything. I think we can really run the risk of half-tushing everything simply because we don't want to give them a better effort. I do think we should strive in most cases to do our best, but also recognize that our best looks different day by day and learn to be okay with that. Truly perfect this side of heaven is just not achievable. Anywho, for this illustration, finishing it while it was a goal, it wasn't the primary goal. My biggest purpose was still to tell a story and to communicate the magic of books, and attempt to do that to the best of my ability. Let's take a second to talk about today's sponsor, me.
I'm the sponsor.
If you're looking to bring a touch of coziness and whimsy to your life, then my artwork might be for you. I have a lot of prints, stickers, and keychains up in my shop, and in fact, I'm holding a sale this weekend. I'm running low on a lot of my print stock, and I won't be reprinting a lot of these designs, so if you've been wanting to snatch up a print or two, now is the perfect time. There's a link in the description to my shop if you're interested in checking it out, and without further ado, let's get back to the painting. So I had cranked out a digital value and color key to give me some guides for the actual painting process, transferred my sketch to watercolor paper, and began my painting speedrun. Now because I needed to have a quick turnaround for this painting, every single brushstroke really needed to matter. I couldn't just be frantically slapping down paint on the page and hoping it worked. I needed to choose my brushes carefully, mix my colors well and swatch them and remix them when the swatches weren't right, and spend a lot of time really just looking at my color key and trying to recreate it on paper. I can honestly say I don't think I've been this present with a painting for a very long time, and it was actually really refreshing to be so focused on it. And I don't think I would have had that level of focus had I not set a time limit on my painting. Now I know in a lot of my videos I say to knock out the white of the paper as fast as possible, and as you can see in this painting, I don't always follow my own advice. There aren't really any true hard and fast art rules that you must follow to a T every single time. Each piece requires different techniques and break in some art rules. Even though knocking out the white of the paper can be very helpful, sometimes working section by section is really what a piece requires. So for this piece, I thought a background to foreground approach would be more helpful for me. It would also allow me to kind of fall in love with the background setting of the little characters in their chairs in front of the window, which would inspire me to bring the rest of the piece up to that level of affection. I don't know if I'm exactly making much sense here, but these are just some of the semi-chaotic thoughts that were going through my head while I was painting. Another thing I tried to do to help me work more speedily on the painting was using bigger brushes for as long as I could before switching to smaller detail brushes. A large brush can cover much more surface area than a little one, so obviously it'll get the job done quicker. For areas like the background bookshelves and the flooring and the walls, I just needed to get the colors down. Those elements didn't really require much detailing, even with the books on those shelves. I needed to create clear areas of focus, and the shelves weren't really an area of focus. The books didn't need to be heavily detailed because they're not what the viewer is going to spend the most time looking at. They do need to be readable as books on a bookshelf, but the spines didn't really need any kind of detailing, and the books themselves didn't need much color or value separation. Now the books on both of the foreground shelves, I wanted to spend more time on. I didn't want them to be wobbly lined, sloppy kind of books. I really wanted to make my brushstrokes smooth and elegant, I guess. But before we chat more about the process of this painting, I want to share just a little bit of the story behind the character. Meet Sir Fergus Magnanimous Fox. He's always been interested in academics and learning of every kind. There is no subject outside of his interest, and growing up, he spent hours every day learning and reading and exploring the worlds inside of words. He was destined to be a scholar. So as Fergus grew up, his passion for learning led him to pursue a long season of adventuring. He traveled to faraway places, learning the beauty and traditions of other cultures, discovering and practicing new hobbies and trades, all the while recording his findings in his journals. But as he continued to age, Fergus knew that he would need to pursue a new adventure, an adventure that was less physically taxing on his body. So he found a home for his books and his soul in the Merricky Meadow. And there he began a new adventure, taking the facts and stories he'd collected and turning them into beautifully bound books for others to enjoy. He built a library with shelves and shelves of adventures for other people to take. Now, of course, Fergus still travels from time to time, but his current passion is to make a way for others to travel and adventure through their own imaginations. Fergus's library is a cozy, magical sanctuary for other meadow folks to sit for as long as they desire to read and discuss their favorite books. So, with that story context, let's chat some more about the process. For the colors, I knew from the very beginning that I really wanted to play off of Fergus's warm tones and create a complementary color palette. Y'all, the more I paint, the more I'm drawn to complementary colors. I don't know why, but I really love the, opposite poles there. So putting him in front of like a teal or a turquoisey blue would really help him to stand out, and that blue would also create a sense of whimsy for our library. Because I wanted the space to feel a little bit more magical, I didn't want to go for a more classic
brown wooden shelf
look. I added some wobbly shelves and twisty stair railings, even some wobbly steps for the ladder. But there's another character in this piece that I really wanted to include to give the space another touch of magic, and that's the warm light in the bottom left corner. And yes, light can absolutely be a character. In fact, I think it's one of the most effective characters for storytelling. So the window in the back is letting in kind of a cool ambient skylight, but I wanted a warm light from the sun to stream through an off-screen open door. It would also play off the blue throughout the piece. That warm light is one of the key characters in this painting. It's secondary to Fergus, but it's very much still a focal point. So as I was working on the piece, I decided I really wanted to have a cast shadow from a character standing in the door. Fergus is waving to someone, and I really wanted to show who he's waving to without them really being on screen. Eventually, I decided that Bobbles would be visiting the library today. Now y'all, cast shadows are not one of my strong suits. I do not understand the mathematics behind lighting and angles of shadows and all that jazz, so I kinda just wung it with this one. And I'm not mad about it. Is it probably realistically accurate? No, but I think it does still get the point across. Now, the Dottie's body bits around the light ring from the door were a very unplanned element, but let's be honest, are we surprised? What happened was that my wet-on-wet layer for the floor in the beginning had gotten kind of wobbly and splotchy, and when I painted in Bobble's shadow, I painted it a little too close to the ladder. I lost some of the clarity of his silhouette, so I started lightening up his left side with some little paint dabs.
Oh my gosh, what a shock.
I liked this effect very, very much, so I went a little bit ham with it. I painted Dottie's body bits all around the light ring, amping up the saturation and variation in each bit. Is it a little too much?
Debatable.
But I had a ton of fun, and I think it really does make the piece just a little bit more magical. Now, I think painting the designs on the covers and the spines of the books was probably one of the most tedious parts of the painting. Again, I really didn't want to rush this. I really wanted to take the time to make them beautiful and elegant. And I'm really happy with how they turned out. The ornate spines and covers of old books are so stunning, and I looked at so many photos for inspiration. So the finishing touch was adding some more greenery to the scene. I really love the aesthetic of natural elements juxtaposed with man-made or fox-made elements, so I thought adding some vining plants over some of the ceiling and the shelves would be a really nice touch. I think an important part of the Merricky Meadow is the harmony between creatures and nature. And I'm trying to incorporate more of that into the illustrations I've been doing for the meadow. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed watching me paint Fergus's library and chatting with me about his story and the chaotic speedrun adventure of this piece. I'm so happy with how it turned out, and it was really such a joyful process for me. Like I said, I generally prefer to take more time on my illustrations, but it was a really fun adventure to turn this one into a speedrun, and I really think I learned a lot from it. Huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon for helping to support my art journey. Y'all are absolutely amazing. If you're interested in downloading this illustration as a coloring page, then join us over on Patreon for a little coloring adventure. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye guys!